The cold air smelled of damp earth and pine as the last traces of sunlight disappeared behind the dense treetops. The forest surrounding Devil's Hollow, deep in the Oregon wilderness, was silent, unnaturally so. No birds, no rustling leaves, just an eerie stillness that made Avery's skin crawl. She adjusted the sleeves of her oversized hoodie, her blue eyes darting toward the shadows between the trees. Something felt off. Ahead, Nate led the way, confidently stomping through the underbrush. He was always the first to dismiss anything that didn't fit his version of reality. "You guys seriously believe those old ghost stories?" He scoffed, glancing back at the others. "It's just a forest." Mason, walking beside him, wasn't so sure. His fingers tightened around the handle of the lantern, the dim glow casting long, distorted shadows. "Then why is it so quiet?" His voice was low, cautious. Callie, the fourth member of the group, lingered behind, arms crossed over her chest. "I'm telling you, we shouldn't be here." Her foot nudged a weathered wooden sign half buried in the dirt. The letters, barely visible beneath years of decay, sent a chill down Avery's spine. "Do not enter." Nate smirked. Signs like that are just to keep idiots from getting lost. He stepped over it without hesitation. The others exchanged uneasy glances before following. The deeper they went, the heavier the air felt, a weight pressing down on them. Every step seemed to absorb sound, muffling their movements. Avery glanced back. The path they had taken already seemed swallowed by the darkness. They reached a clearing just as night fully settled in. The fire cracked, illuminating their faces in flickering orange light. Mason busied himself with setting up camp, his movements a little too quick, too controlled. Callie sat stiffly on a fallen log, hugging her knees. "I don't like this," she muttered. Nate laughed, tossing a stick into the fire. "Relax. It's just your imagination." But Avery wasn't so sure. That feeling, that heavy, suffocating presence hadn't left her. She couldn't shake the thought that something out there was watching. Then came the sound. A slow, deliberate crunch of leaves from just beyond the tree line. Not an animal, not the wind. Something else. And it was getting closer. The sound came again, closer this time. A slow, deliberate step. Then another. The fire flickered as if the air itself had shifted. Avery's breath hitched. Mason set down the lantern, his hands tense at his sides. Nate stood, scanning the darkness beyond the trees. His face was unreadable, but the way his fingers curled slightly betrayed his unease. Probably just a deer. He didn't sound convinced. Callie shook her head. "That's not a deer." Silence stretched between them. The woods, once eerily still, now felt alive with something unseen. The crunch of leaves stopped. Then a whisper, low and almost inhuman, slithered. Avery turned sharply, but there was nothing, just the firelight playing tricks on the trees. Mason exhaled. "We should go back." Nate let out a dry laugh. "Over a couple of noises, you guys are losing it," but his voice lacked the confidence it had earlier. Avery swallowed, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut. She glanced at Callie, who hadn't moved from the log. Her face was pale, her eyes locked on the tree line, wide and unblinking. Then the whisper came again, closer. Mason grabbed the lantern. "We need to go. Now." But before anyone could move, the fire sputtered violently, as if something had passed through it. The shadows twisted, the trees seemed to close in, the air grew thick, pressing down on them. And then, just at the edge of the light, something stepped forward. The figure stood just beyond the firelight, half hidden in the shadows. Its shape was human, but something was wrong. The proportions were off. Limbs too long, head tilted at an unnatural angle. The air around it seemed distorted, as if reality itself struggled to hold its presence. Avery felt her pulse hammering in her ears. Mason took a step back, gripping the lantern so tightly his knuckles turned white. Callie barely breathed. Nate, standing closest to the edge of the firelight, squinted. "Who the hell is that?" No response. The figure didn't move. Then, slowly, it raised a hand. Not in a wave, not in greeting. Just a slow, deliberate motion. The fingers curled unnaturally. The whispering sound returned, though the figure's mouth never moved. Avery's stomach twisted. Something about that whisper felt familiar, like a voice she had heard before but couldn't place. She wanted to turn and run, but her legs wouldn't move. Mason reached for her wrist. "We need to..." The fire exploded upward, casting long, violent shadows against the trees. The figure was gone. Callie gasped, stumbling backward. Nate spun around, scanning the trees. The whispering had stopped, replaced by a suffocating silence. Mason cursed under his breath. "We're leaving." No one argued. They grabbed their things in frantic, jerky movements, stuffing half-packed bags with shaking hands. Avery's hoodie sleeve caught on a branch as she slung her backpack over her shoulder. She yanked it free, her breath uneven. Nate led the way, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The trees felt closer than before, pressing in from all sides. The dirt path they had followed earlier seemed narrower. The sounds of the forest had vanished. As they walked, Avery couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. A presence lingered just beyond her vision, watching. Then, somewhere behind them, the whispering started again. Closer, this time. The whispering moved with them, shifting between trees, always just out of reach. It wasn't the wind. It had rhythm, an unnatural cadence, like something trying to speak but failing. Avery's hands trembled as she tightened the straps of her backpack. Mason's flashlight flickered. His breathing was uneven. Callie clung to Nate's arm, her usual confidence stripped away. Nate glanced back. "We need to move faster." They quickened their pace, feet crunching against dried leaves. The trail should have led back to the car, but something was wrong. The path twisted in ways it hadn't before, curving where it should have been straight. The trees looked the same, repeating like a pattern in a broken loop. Callie whispered, "This isn't right." No one answered. They all felt it. Mason gritted his teeth. "Stick together. Keep moving." The flashlight dimmed again. Then, without warning, it died completely. Darkness swallowed them. Avery gasped. She reached for her phone, fumbling to turn on the screen. The battery, which had been at 60% earlier, was dead. The others tried theirs. Nothing. Something snapped in the distance. A branch breaking. Not from an animal. Something heavier. Nate cursed under his breath. He reached into his bag, pulling out a small pocket knife. It looked useless against whatever was out there. Then, the whispering stopped. For a moment, there was nothing. No wind, no movement, just the suffocating weight of silence pressing against their ears. Avery's chest tightened. Then, from the darkness ahead, something shifted. A shadow moved between the trees. Not walking, gliding. It stopped just beyond the reach of their vision. The air felt thick, heavy. The scent of damp earth mixed with something metallic. Callie whimpered, "We need to go." Mason took a shaky breath. "Where?" The shadow moved again, closer this time. Then, in a voice that did not belong to any of them, it whispered one word. "Avery." Avery's breath caught in her throat. The way the voice had said her name wasn't human. It dragged at the edges, stretching in a way that made her skin crawl. Mason's fingers tightened around the dead flashlight. His knuckles were white. No one moved. The shadow remained just beyond the trees. It had no face, no features, just darkness shifting like a mirage, taller than any of them. Nate gripped his pocket knife. It felt ridiculous, a toy against something like this. He forced himself to speak. "We're leaving." The shadow tilted, as if listening. Avery took a step back. Her body screamed at her to run, but she knew better. Running in a place like this where the trees repeated, where their phones had died, felt like a mistake. Callie reached for Nate's arm, fingers shaking. "Where's the trail?" That was the problem. It should have been right there. The path they had followed for hours was gone, replaced by gnarled roots and jagged rocks. The forest had shifted when they weren't looking. Mason whispered, "This is a trap." The moment he said it, the whispering returned. not from one place, but everywhere, surrounding them. Low, urgent, like a warning, or a lure. Callie turned sharply, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" A sound slithered through the leaves, something moving, faster than before. Nate grabbed Avery's wrist. "We go now." They moved together, stepping carefully, trying to find a way back. The air felt thicker, pressing down. Every breath was harder to take. Behind them, the shadow began to shift. No footsteps, no sound, just movement, unnatural, following. Avery's pulse hammered in her ears. The trees stretched higher, their branches twisting into unnatural angles. She knew they were moving, but it felt like they were going nowhere. Then, Mason stopped. His expression was tight, panicked. "What?" Nate hissed. Mason raised a shaking hand, pointing ahead. Between the trees, barely visible in the dark, stood a cabin. Old, wrong, like it had been there for centuries, waiting. The door was slightly open, and from inside, something was breathing. Avery couldn't take her eyes off the cabin. It looked ancient, its wooden frame warped and blackened with age. The roof sagged, half covered in moss. The windows were dark, like empty sockets staring back. The door, barely ajar, creaked as if breathing with the wind. Mason shifted uneasily. "We shouldn't go near that." Nate didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on the open doorway. His grip on Avery's wrist tightened. Callie swallowed hard. "Did you hear that?" No one answered. They all heard it. A scraping sound. Something moving just inside the cabin. The whispering in the forest had stopped. The air felt thick, pressing against their skin. Every instinct told them to turn around, to get as far away as possible. But the forest behind them had changed again. The trees had grown closer, their trunks forming an almost solid wall. The way they had come was gone. Nate exhaled sharply. "We don't have a choice." He stepped forward. Avery's pulse pounded. She wanted to stop him, but what else could they do? The darkness between the trees felt just as dangerous as whatever was inside. Mason muttered something under his breath, gripping his flashlight tighter. It was useless. The battery's long dead, but holding it felt better than nothing. Callie hesitated before following Nate. Her hands trembled at her sides. Avery moved with them, each step heavy. The cabin smelled of rot, a damp, decaying scent that clung to the air. The wooden steps creaked beneath their weight. Nate reached the door first. He hesitated before pushing it open wider. The inside was worse than they expected. The walls were covered in deep scratches, like something had been trying to claw its way out. The floor was layered in dirt, leaves, and something darker. Dried, crusted. A table stood in the center, its surface marked with strange symbols, unfamiliar, unevenly carved. Avery's stomach twisted. This place isn't abandoned. Mason turned toward the fireplace. The ashes were still warm. Nate moved cautiously, scanning the room. There were no signs of life, but there was an unsettling presence, a feeling of being watched. Callie shuddered. "Let's not stay here." Then, a sound from the back of the cabin, a slow, deliberate creak of a floorboard. Not from them. Someone or something was in the next room. Avery barely had time to react before Nate grabbed her arm and pulled her back. Mason raised his useless flashlight as if it could help. Callie held her breath. The sound came again. A slow, deliberate creak of a floorboard. Nate's voice was barely above a whisper. "Someone's there." Avery's pulse hammered against her ribs. The open doorway leading to the next room gaped like a black hole. A faint, sour scent drifted from within, something rancid and old. The floor was layered in dust except for a set of footprints leading from the doorway to where they stood. Fresh footprints. Callie's breathing quickened. "We should go." No one moved. Mason reached into his pocket, pulling out the pocket knife he always carried. It looked small in his shaking hands. Nate took a step forward. "Stay here." Avery grabbed his wrist. "Don't." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. The silence stretched, growing heavier. Then, something moved in the shadows beyond the doorway. A rustling sound, slow and deliberate. Like someone shifting their weight. Then came a whisper. a voice that didn't belong to any of them. "You shouldn't be here." Callie gasped, her fingers digging into Avery's arm. Nate's grip on the flashlight tightened. His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white. "Who's there?" Silence. The air in the cabin grew thick, pressing against their lungs. Avery's skin prickled. She wanted to run, but her feet refused to move. Then, a figure emerged from the darkness. At first, it was just an outline, tall, motionless. Then the details came into focus. A man, or something that used to be a man. His face was twisted, gaunt, skin stretched too tightly over his bones. His eyes were deep-set, black pits. His lips curled into something that could have been a grin, but there was nothing human in it. Mason took a step back, nearly stumbling. The figure didn't move. Callie whimpered, "We have to go." Nate took another step forward. "Who are you?" The figure's head tilted, bones cracking with the motion. His voice was barely above a whisper. "You brought her back." Avery's stomach dropped. "What?" Before anyone could react, the figure lunged. The forest was silent, not the quiet of the wind settling or the distant hum of insects. It was the kind of silence that pressed in from all sides, thick and unnatural. Avery felt it first, the way the air seemed heavier, like something unseen had shifted. Nate stood rigid beside her, his breath slow and controlled. Callie clenched her jaw, arms wrapped around herself, while Mason adjusted his grip on the rusted hatchet he had found earlier. They had been walking for hours, moving in what should have been a straight line. But nothing was right. The trees looked the same, too similar. The ground felt damp, even though it hadn't rained in days. Every now and then, Avery caught the scent of something decayed, brief but strong enough to make her stomach turn. Mason exhaled, breaking the silence. "We're lost." No one disagreed. Avery glanced back. The cabin was gone, swallowed by the darkness between the trees. She thought about the figure they had seen inside, tall and motionless. It hadn't followed them. Or at least they hadn't seen it move. Callie shivered. "I don't like this." Nate spoke without looking at her. "None of us do." The whisper returned. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, just like before. Low, distorted, not in any language they recognized, but the meaning was clear. "Keep walking." Mason tightened his grip on the hatchet. "Did you hear that?" No one answered. Avery's heartbeat quickened. The air was shifting again. Then they saw it. A figure standing between the trees, barely visible in the dim light. Not the one from before. This one was different. Its limbs were long, too long. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle. No eyes, no mouth, just a hollow void where a face should have been. It didn't move. But it wasn't still either. Something about it pulsed, like it wasn't entirely in one place. Avery stepped back, but the ground beneath her foot felt wrong. Too soft. She looked down. The dirt was moving, shifting like something was underneath, just inches from the surface. Callie made a sound half gasp, half sob. Mason took a step forward. "We need to go." The whisper returned, louder this time. "You're not supposed to be here." Then the figure moved. Not toward them, behind them. Avery turned, her stomach dropping. The path they had come from was gone. The trees loomed closer, their twisted branches reaching like skeletal fingers. The air was thick, heavy with something unseen. Avery's breath came in short, shallow bursts as she scanned the darkness ahead. They had been walking for what felt like hours, but the forest never changed. Every direction looked the same. There was no end. Mason was ahead, gripping the hatchet so tightly his knuckles were white. Callie clung to Nate's arm, her steps uneven. None of them spoke. The silence was suffocating. Then, the whisper returned. A low, guttural sound, threading through the trees like a breeze that carried no wind. The words were unclear, distorted, but they felt close. Closer than before. Avery stopped. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Something wasn't right. Nate turned to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "What is it?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the ground beneath Mason's feet. The dirt was shifting again. Subtle, unmistakable. Mason took another step. The earth caved beneath him. There was no time to react. The ground split open, a gaping maw of darkness swallowing him whole. His scream barely had time to escape before he was gone. Callie lunged forward, dropping to her knees at the edge of the pit. "Mason!" Her voice cracked, raw with panic. Nate grabbed her wrist, pulling her back. "Don't..." The whisper grew louder. Not a single voice now, but many. Layered, overlapping, speaking in a chorus of words that didn't belong. The trees trembled. The shadows stretched. Then the ground beneath them shifted again. Avery stumbled, her vision blurring for a split second. When it cleared, the pit was gone. No trace of it remained. No sign of Mason. The forest was silent once more. Callie backed away, shaking her head. "Number no." He was just. Nate's grip on her tightened. "We have to keep moving." His voice was hollow. Avery swallowed the lump in her throat. Her body screamed for her to run, but there was nowhere to go. The path ahead was gone. The trees had closed in behind them. And then she saw it, a figure standing between the trees. Not the one they had seen before. Something worse, something waiting. The figure stood motionless, half hidden between the trees. Tall, impossibly thin. Its limbs stretched unnaturally long. The shadows clung to it, shifting like smoke. It had no face, but Avery could feel its gaze burrowing into her skin. Callie let out a strangled sob, her hands trembling as she clutched Nate's arm. "It's still watching us." Nate didn't respond. His jaw was clenched so tightly his teeth might crack. His grip tightened around the hunting knife in his hand. Avery forced herself to breathe. "We keep moving." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Stay together. No one falls behind." The trees groaned around them, as if the forest itself was waking up. The air thickened, pressing against their lungs. They moved forward, the dirt shifting beneath their feet. Then, the whispering returned. It wasn't coming from behind them anymore. It was ahead, waiting. Avery's pulse hammered in her ears. The path twisted, the trees pressing closer, their branches clawing at her hoodie. The ground was damp, too soft, as if something had been buried just beneath the surface. Callie stumbled, barely catching herself. She was breathing too fast, her eyes wild with fear. "Where's Mason?" Her voice cracked. "We can't just leave him. He's gone." Nate's tone was sharp, but there was something else beneath it. Something fragile. Callie shook her head, her hair sticking to her damp face. "Number, we have to." The whispering grew louder, a low murmur at first, then layered voices speaking over each other. The words were still twisted, wrong, but Avery could almost make them out now. "Behind you." Avery turned. The figure was closer. Not between the trees anymore, not watching from the distance. It was standing right behind Callie. Before Avery could shout, the thing moved. Not like a person, not like anything human. Callie screamed. Then she was gone. Late at night, the forest was deathly quiet. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the campsite. Mia pulled her hoodie tighter around her, her blue eyes darting between the trees. Logan sat beside her, sharpening a small knife against a rock. Across from them, Alex poked at the embers with a stick, his face unreadable. The fourth member of their group, Jared, was missing. Again, the wind whispered through the branches, carrying a scent that wasn't quite right. Something metallic, something rotten. Mia exhaled, trying to shake the creeping unease settling in her bones. Jared had wandered off hours ago, claiming he needed to relieve himself. He should have been back by now. Alex finally spoke, his voice low. "We need to find him." Logan stood without a word, sliding his knife into his pocket. He nodded toward the dense woods. "If we split up, we cover more ground." Mia hesitated. "Splitting up? Really?" No one answered. She swallowed hard. There was no choice. Jared might be in trouble. The three of them moved into the darkness, the cold biting at their skin. The further they walked, the heavier the air became, thick with damp earth and decay. The flashlight in Mia's trembling hands flickered. Then, a rustling ahead. "Jared?" Logan called out. Silence. Then laughter. Soft. Breathless. Not Jared's. Mia froze. Alex grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. Logan took a step forward, his jaw clenched. Something shifted behind the trees. A figure emerged, slow and deliberate. It was Jared. But something was wrong. His clothes were torn, his hands stained dark, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, and his Aisha's eyes were hollow, empty. And he was smiling. "You shouldn't have come looking for me," he whispered. Then the flashlight went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. The flashlight flickered back on, but Jared was gone. Only the trees stood before them, unmoving. The silence was heavier now, pressing against their ears. Mia's breath came fast. She turned to Logan, his face pale in the dim light. Alex stood rigid, his fists clenched. "We need to go back," Mia whispered. Logan didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the spot where Jared had stood. A branch snapped behind them. Mia spun around, heart hammering. Nothing, just blackness. Then the voice, soft, crawling beneath her skin. "Why leave now?" It came from everywhere. The trees, the ground, inside her head. Alex grabbed Mia's arm and pulled her back toward camp. Logan hesitated before following. They moved quickly, but the forest stretched longer than before. The trees seemed denser, the path unfamiliar. Panic gnawed at Mia's chest. "We came this way, right?" No one answered. The air turned thick, damp. The smell of rot clung to their skin. Then footsteps. Close. Mia whipped around. A shadow stood among the trees. The same crooked posture. The same hollow stare. Jared. But he wasn't alone. Figures emerged from the dark, their eyes empty voids. Clothes torn, bodies stiff. Mia's stomach twisted. She stepped back, bumping into Logan. "Run," Alex breathed. And they did. The forest was endless. Their breaths came in ragged gasps as they ran, feet pounding against the uneven ground. The figures behind them moved without sound, their silhouettes shifting between the trees, like shadows untethered from reality. Mia's legs burned, but she didn't stop. The cold air clawed at her throat. She risked a glance back. They were closer. Her pulse spiked. Logan was just ahead, pushing through the thick brush. Alex followed, his movements sharp with urgency. The only sound was the rustling of leaves, the snap of twigs beneath their weight, and the distant whispering voices that didn't belong. Then, the clearing. It appeared suddenly, stretching wide beneath the cloud-covered sky. The remnants of a long-forgotten cabin stood in the center, its wooden walls warped with age. A single window gaped open, black as the void. Logan skidded to a stop. Inside, now. Mia hesitated. Every instinct screamed against it, but the figures were closing in. Alex grabbed her wrist, yanking her forward. They stumbled through the doorway, slamming it shut behind them. The wood shuddered. Darkness swallowed the space. Mia's breath came fast, her fingers trembling as she fumbled for her phone. The weak glow of the screen revealed rotting floorboards, a crumbling fireplace, walls lined with deep scratches. A whisper slithered through the air. Her head snapped up. The others had heard it too. Alex edged toward the window, peering through the cracked glass. His face paled. They're just standing there. Mia swallowed hard. How many? A beat of silence. Then, too many. Logan cursed under his breath. This place isn't safe. Something creaked above them. Mia stiffened. That hadn't come from outside. Slowly, she lifted her phone higher. The light barely reached the ceiling beams, but she saw it. A figure crouched among the rafters, its limbs twisted at unnatural angles. Its mouth hung open, dark and hollow. Her scream barely left her throat before the thing dropped. The wind howled through the empty street, rattling loose shutters and sending dry leaves skittering along the pavement. Ethan pulled his coat tighter, his breath visible in the cold air. The night stretched ahead, silent, except for the occasional distant hum of a passing car. He had expected something to happen by now, but the darkness offered no answers. A flicker of movement caught his eye near the alleyway across the street. He didn't react immediately, keeping his posture relaxed. Years of experience had taught him not to give away his thoughts. Instead, he shifted his weight, as if adjusting his stance for warmth, and waited. A shadow detached itself from the wall, stepping into the dim glow of a street lamp. It was a man, tall, lean, moving with the deliberate care of someone who didn't want to be seen. Ethan exhaled slowly, forcing patience into his body. If this was the contact he had been waiting for, they were already late. The man hesitated before walking toward him. Ethan noted the details, the slight stiffness in his stride, the way his hands stayed in his pockets, the flick of his gaze to the left before making eye contact. He was cautious, but not afraid. That was a problem. Fear made people predictable. "You took your time," Ethan said. His voice was neutral, neither accusing nor friendly. The man stopped, just out of reach, studying him. "Things changed," he said, his voice rough. "We have to move now." Ethan tilted his head slightly. "We? You think you're alone in this?" The man's lips twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You don't know half of it." Ethan didn't reply. He had learned long ago that silence was often more effective than words. The man shifted, glancing around. "They're watching," he muttered. Ethan remained still. "Who?" "You already know," the man said, taking a step closer, "or you wouldn't be here." Ethan's pulse remained steady, but he knew this conversation had just changed. The man wasn't just a contact, he was something else, something unexpected. The street lamp above them flickered. For a split second, darkness swallowed the space between them. When the light returned, the man was holding something out to him. A folded piece of paper. Ethan took it without hesitation, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. "Read it when you're alone," the man said. Then he turned and walked away. Ethan watched him go, waiting until he disappeared into the shadows before unfolding the paper. His eyes scanned the message, and for the first time in a long while his breath caught. Ethan's fingers tightened around the paper. The message was short, hastily written in sharp, deliberate strokes. "Don't trust anyone, not even yourself." A chill crept up his spine. He looked around, scanning the street for any sign of the man who had given it to him, but the alleyway was empty. The city was never truly silent, but in this moment, everything felt still. He folded the note carefully, slipping it into his pocket before walking toward his car. His steps were steady, controlled. The words lingered in his mind, refusing to settle. "Not even yourself." As he reached the vehicle, he pulled open the door, but before getting in, he checked the side mirror. A habit, a precaution. A woman was watching him from across the street. She stood partially concealed by the entrance of a closed cafe, her posture casual, almost indifferent. But Ethan knew better. Her gaze was too direct. She wanted him to see her. He pretended not to notice, sliding into the driver's seat. The engine hummed to life, the dashboard glowing faintly. He pulled away from the curb, keeping his movements smooth. In the rearview mirror, the woman remained still, but he had no doubt this wasn't over. He drove without a destination, letting instinct guide him. The city lights blurred past. He needed time to think, to process. The warning on the paper was meant for him, but from who? And why now? His phone vibrated. He hesitated before checking it. A blocked number. Just a single message. "You're running out of time." His grip tightened on the wheel. Then another text appeared. "Don't go home." His pulse remained steady, but something shifted in his gut. This wasn't paranoia. This was real. He exhaled slowly and took the next exit. If someone wanted him off balance, it wasn't going to work. The motel was the kind of place people used when they didn't want to be found. Ethan paid in cash, taking a room near the back. The clerk barely looked at him. Good. Inside, he He locked the door, checked the windows, then pulled out the note again. The ink had smudged slightly, but the message was clear. Don't trust anyone, not even yourself. He leaned against the wall, exhaling. The second part of the message disturbed him more than the first. His phone vibrated again. This time, it was a call, the same blocked number. He let it ring. Then, just before it stopped, he answered. Silence. A breath. Then a voice, low and calm. You already know, don't you? His fingers tensed around the phone. I know a lot of things, he said. You'll have to be more specific. A pause. Then, they're making their move. Click. The call ended. Ethan lowered the phone, staring at it. The weight in his chest deepened. Someone knew more than they should, and they weren't done yet. Ethan let the silence settle. The air in the motel room felt heavier, thick with something unspoken. He turned the phone over in his hand, replaying the last words in his head. They're making their move? The weight of that sentence pressed against him. Someone out there had been watching, waiting, and now they were ready. He pushed off the wall and crossed the room. The curtains were drawn, but he parted them slightly, scanning the parking lot. A single car sat under the flickering neon light. Empty. The street beyond was quiet, still. Something felt off. His instincts had never failed him before. He stepped back, letting the curtain fall into place. He needed information. Fast. The laptop booted up, the screen casting a cold glow across the dim room. He bypassed the usual security measures, tapping into a private network. If someone had been tracking his movements, there would be a digital footprint. He started with traffic cameras, the alley where he received the note, the route he took afterward, the woman watching him. There she appeared in frame, standing exactly where he had seen her. But a few frames earlier, another figure was present. A man, short-cropped hair, dark jacket, handing her something before slipping away. Ethan zoomed in. The image was grainy, but he recognized the face. It was someone he hadn't seen in years. Mason, a name he thought he had buried along with everything else. His pulse remained steady, but beneath the surface, tension coiled tight. Mason had been one of the best in the field. Precise, cold. If he was involved, then this wasn't just some random warning. It was something bigger. Something personal. Ethan closed the laptop and stood. He wouldn't get answers from a screen. He grabbed his jacket, checked his weapon, then stepped out. The motel hallway was empty. The air smelled faintly of cigarette smoke and cheap disinfectant. He moved with purpose, taking the back exit. If Mason was here, Ethan wouldn't wait for him to make the first move. Outside, the night stretched out, vast and indifferent. The streetlights buzzed softly, casting uneven shadows. He walked, keeping his pace relaxed. The city had a rhythm, and he moved with it. He didn't have a plan, not yet, but he had a destination. There was only one place Mason would go, and if Ethan was right, they wouldn't be going alone. 20 minutes later, he was standing in front of an old bar, the kind that never closed, where names didn't matter and questions were bad for business. He stepped inside. The air was thick with smoke and conversation. A few heads turned, then dismissed him. Good. He spotted Mason immediately, seated in the back, a drink in front of him. The woman from earlier sat beside him. They had been expecting him. Ethan approached, sliding into the seat opposite. Mason looked up, his expression unreadable. You're late, Mason said. Ethan leaned back. Didn't realize we had an appointment. Mason smirked. You always were slow to catch on. Ethan's gaze flicked to the woman. Who's she? She answered before Mason could. Someone who doesn't have time for small talk. Ethan studied her. She was composed, but there was an edge to her, a controlled tension. Mason exhaled, setting his drink down. Let's skip the games. You got the note. Ethan didn't respond. Mason continued. We're out of time. They're already in play. A slow, deliberate beat. Then the woman leaned forward. And whether you like it or not, you're part of it. Ethan held her gaze. Then finally he spoke, Start talking." Mason didn't speak immediately. He studied Ethan, as if measuring how much to reveal. The woman beside him remained still, her fingers lightly resting on the edge of her glass. The bar noise faded into the background, leaving only the tension between them. Finally, Mason exhaled. They found her. Ethan didn't react, but something inside him shifted. He knew who Mason meant. "Where?" Ethan asked. Mason tapped his fingers against the table, considering. "A week ago, she resurfaced in Prague. Someone spotted her near Old Town. Then again, outside a safe house we used years ago. But she wasn't alone." Ethan felt the weight of those words. He had spent years thinking she was gone. The idea that she had been out there, moving in the shadows, changed everything. Who was with her? The woman across from him answered this time. "We don't know his name, but he's connected. The kind of connected that gets people killed before they even know they're being hunted." Ethan's fingers curled slightly against the table. "You sure it's her?" Mason slid a small photograph across the wood. Ethan picked it up. The image was grainy, taken from a distance, but the face was unmistakable. "Lena." Ethan set the picture down. His pulse hadn't changed, but his mind was already moving. If Lena had surfaced, it wasn't by accident. She never did anything without a reason. Mason leaned forward. "Whoever she's with, he's not some small player. He's got resources, contacts, and he's keeping her close." Ethan met his gaze. "Which means she's either working with him or she's a prisoner." Mason nodded. "Either way, we need to move fast." Ethan glanced at the woman. She was still watching him, assessing. "Who are you?" For the first time, her expression shifted. A flicker of something amusement, maybe. "Mara," she said. "I'm the reason Mason is still breathing." Ethan let that settle. Mason had always been capable, but if he needed someone like her at his side, that meant things were worse than he'd let on. Mason sighed. "Listen, Ethan, we can keep circling this, but the truth is simple. If we don't act now, we lose her. And if we lose her, we lose whatever game she's playing." Ethan didn't answer right away. He turned the possibilities over in his mind, weighing the risks. Then, he made his decision. "Where do we start?" Mara smiled slightly. "Now you're asking the right questions." They left the bar separately. Ethan took the long route back to his motel, making sure he wasn't followed. Inside, he locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed. The photograph was still in his hand. Lena. The last time he had seen her, everything had gone wrong. He had spent years convincing himself she was gone, that she had disappeared because she wanted to. Now, none of that mattered. If she was in danger, he would find her. If she wasn't, if she had chosen this, he needed to know why. Ethan set the photograph down. Then, he started planning. Ethan woke before dawn. His mind had been running calculations all night, scenarios shifting with every piece of information Mason had given him. Prague, a safe house. Lena was someone powerful. Each detail unraveled new questions, but none had answers yet. He packed light. A change of clothes. Cash. A burner phone. No weapons. Those would come later. He left the motel without looking back. Blending into the early morning streets, Mason had given him an address, a temporary base in the city. Ethan didn't ask where the resources came from. Mason had always had ways of getting what he did, even when they were young and reckless. The airport was a blur, a ticket purchased with cash, no luggage, no conversation. He slept for part of the flight, or at least closed his eyes long enough for his body to reset. When he landed in Prague, the sky was overcast, the air thick with the promise of rain. Mason was waiting near baggage claim, leaning against a pillar. Mara stood a few feet away, arms crossed, scanning the crowd. She was careful, constantly checking for threats. Ethan liked that. "You made good time," Mason said. Ethan adjusted the strap of his bag. "Where's the safe house?" Mason nodded toward the exit. "Not far. But we need to talk first." They drove through the city in a nondescript sedan. Mason was behind the wheel, Mara in the passenger seat, Ethan in the back. The streets blurred past, Cobblestones and old architecture mixing with flashes of neon. Ethan finally broke the silence. "What aren't you telling me?" Mason glanced at him in the mirror. "We weren't the only ones watching Lena. Someone else was tracking her, someone faster than us." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Who?" Mara answered this time. "We don't know yet." But they got to the safe house first. Ethan sat up, and Mason turned down a narrow alley and parked. And they burned it down. The smell of smoke still clung to the building. The fire had been contained before it spread to the neighboring structures, but the inside was gutted. Charred walls, broken glass. Whatever had been here was gone. Ethan stepped carefully over the debris. The heat had warped metal fixtures, blackened furniture beyond recognition. Mara crouched near a collapsed section of the ceiling, running her fingers over a pile of ash. Accelerant. Whoever did this wanted everything erased. Ethan glanced at Mason. "Any bodies?" Mason shook his head. Number, either Lena got out before they came, or they took her. Ethan exhaled slowly. That changed things. If she had been taken, they were already behind. If she had escaped, she would be moving fast, covering her tracks. He scanned the wreckage, looking for something that had been missed, and then he saw it. Near the back wall, partially buried under fallen plaster, was a metal lockbox. It was scorched, but intact. Ethan pulled it free and flipped it open. Inside was a single object. A chess piece. The knight. Mason swore under his breath. Mara's expression didn't change, but Ethan knew she understood. The knight wasn't just a message. It was a signature. Lena's. Back at the temporary base, Ethan set the chess piece on the table. It was smooth in his palm, cool, despite the heat it had survived. Mason poured a drink, but didn't touch it. "She left that for you." Ethan nodded.